Snowflakes drifted through the bitter night air of New York City, blanketing the streets in icy silence. In the back seat of a sleek black car, Richard Hayes sat in warmth, staring through the glass at a shivering figure huddled near a dim street lamp. The woman, Emma, clutched a worn blanket that barely shielded her from the cold. Her cheeks were pale, her fingers trembling, her eyes holding that empty, tired look of someone who had been invisible to the world for far too long. Richard's chest tightened. He had passed her corner before, always feeling a tug of guilt, but tonight something stirred in him, something more than pity. He stepped out into the cold, his polished shoes crunching on snow, and walked toward her. Emma's wary eyes flickered up at him, bracing for the usual, loose change, or nothing at all. But his words were nothing she could have imagined. "I'll pay you to carry a child for me," he said plainly, his voice steady, almost businesslike. The words hung in the frosty air, shocking her into silence. She stared, uncertain if she had heard right. A stranger offering such a thing, it made no sense. Her first instinct was to refuse. But then her stomach growled, the icy wind bit deeper, and the weight of another endless night on the streets pressed down on her. The thought of a warm bed, food, and safety for even a short while flickered in her mind like a fragile flame. She studied his face, serious, determined, and strangely gentle. Something in his expression told her this was no cruel trick. Slowly, hesitantly, she nodded. That single choice, born of desperation and trust in a man she barely knew, would set in motion a story that neither of them could have ever predicted. Emma's world changed overnight. One day she was sleeping on concrete under a ragged blanket, and the next she was standing in a small but cozy apartment, 4 walls, a bed, a heater, and a kitchen stocked with food. Richard had made all the arrangements without fuss. A doctor came to check her health, nurses visited regularly, and every need was met without her having to ask. It was strange. She had expected constant supervision or demands, but Richard kept his distance. He would drop by once in a while, asking polite questions about her health and the baby's progress, then leave just as quickly. There were no long conversations, no personal stories, only the quiet assurance that everything she needed would be provided. At first, Emma was suspicious. People didn't give without expecting something in return, at least, that had been her experience on the streets. But as weeks turned into months, she realized Richard never treated her like an object or a transaction. His visits were brief, but his eyes always lingered on her for a moment, as if searching for something unspoken. With each passing day, she felt pieces of herself returning. She began cooking again, humming to herself while stirring soup. She brushed her hair, bought a simple dress, and caught herself smiling in the mirror. The baby's steady heartbeat during checkups became a melody of hope. Still, she couldn't ignore the quiet shadow in Richard's expression. Sometimes, when he thought she wasn't looking, his face softened into something almost mournful. It was a kind of pain she recognized, the kind that comes from losing something you can never get back. Emma didn't know his story yet, but she sensed that behind his generosity lay a wound as deep as her own. It was a quiet afternoon, sunlight spilling through the small apartment window. Emma sat on the couch, her hands resting gently over the curve of her growing belly, when Richard stopped by for one of his rare visits. He placed a bag of groceries on the counter and was about to leave when she spoke, her voice hesitant but curious. "Why me?" she asked, her eyes locking onto his. "You could have gone to an agency. Chosen someone with a better life." For a moment, he froze, as if the question had struck a place he kept locked away. He looked at the floor, then slowly took a seat across from her. His voice was low, almost fragile. "My wife, she's gone now. But she always dreamed of having a child. We tried everything, years of doctors, treatments, but it never happened. When she died, that dream died with her." Emma's throat tightened. She had never seen him this open before. He took a breath, his gaze softening. "I thought, maybe I could still honor her wish." But if I was going to do it, I wanted it to mean something more. Not just a baby for me, but a chance for someone else to start over. I saw you that night, freezing on the street, and I thought, maybe we can help each other. The room fell into a thick, emotional silence. Emma felt her chest ache, not from pity, but from the depth of his sincerity. For the first time, she understood this was never just about money or a transaction. It was about love that hadn't faded, grief that still lingered, and a hope that maybe, through this child, both of them could find a new beginning. The winter air outside was sharp, but inside the hospital room, everything felt warm and still. Emma lay exhausted yet glowing, her arms cradling a tiny bundle wrapped in soft white blankets. The baby's first cries had faded into gentle coos, and when Richard stepped in, his breath caught. The boy had the same piercing blue eyes as Richard's late wife, eyes he had thought he'd never see again. For a moment, he simply stood there, overwhelmed, the weight of years of grief and longing pressing against the joy swelling in his chest. He moved closer, his voice breaking slightly. "He's perfect." Emma looked up at him, her expression tender but serious. She took a slow breath before speaking. "Richard. I don't want the money anymore." He blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" Tears welled in her eyes, but her smile was steady. "I just want to be in his life. I didn't think I could love anyone again, but I love him. Not because of the deal, not because of what you gave me, but because he's mine too, in a way I can't let go of." Richard was silent, stunned. He had always imagined this moment ending with a formal goodbye, a signed agreement, and Emma walking away into whatever new life the money could buy her. Instead, she was asking for something he hadn't prepared for, something far more complicated, but also, far more beautiful. In that moment, he realized this wasn't just his child, or his late wife's dream come true. This was the start of something unexpected, a bond born from hardship, kindness, and the kind of love you can't plan for. Snow was falling again the day Emma left the hospital, but this time she wasn't stepping out into the cold alone. Richard was there, holding the baby carrier in one hand and opening the car door for her with the other. The plan had been simple: he would take the child home, and she would move on with the life his payment had afforded her. But neither of them could pretend anymore that this was just an arrangement. When they reached his house, Richard paused at the doorway. "Emma. I've been thinking," he began, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "I don't want you to disappear from his life. You've given him love before he even knew the world. If you're willing, I'd like you to stay. We can raise him together." Emma's breath caught. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Then she nodded, her eyes glistening. "I'd like that." Days turned into weeks, and their once strange partnership grew into something warm and steady. Mornings were filled with the baby's laughter, afternoons with shared meals, and evenings with quiet conversations by the fire. The grand house that had once felt so empty now carried the heartbeat of a home. They weren't bound by romance, nor by the traditional idea of family, but by something rarer, a shared loss that had bloomed into shared hope. And as the baby drifted to sleep one night, Richard whispered the words that had been sitting in his heart since the day their lives first crossed: "Sometimes, the richest thing you can give, is a second chance at life." From a cold street corner to the warmth of a home, Emma's journey with Richard was never just about an unusual agreement, it was about two broken lives finding healing through the same small heartbeat. What began as a transaction born of desperation and grief transformed into a bond that neither of them expected. Richard honored his late wife's dream, but in doing so, he gave Emma something just as precious: dignity, belonging, and love she thought she'd lost forever. In turn, Emma gave Richard not only a son but also the comfort of knowing his child would grow up surrounded by compassion. Together, they discovered that family isn't defined by blood or wealth, but by the willingness to open your heart. And in the end, they both learned that the greatest riches in life come not from what you keep, but from the second chances you give.